There's a $375,
$375,000.
did I miss the 1,000 part?
Because I'll write that check for $375 right now.
So one of the things that we've talked about was storage needs. We have a lot of need, and in addition to that, if the old highway garage does come offline, we need to be prepared to invest in an alternative place to put some of our equipment and our vehicles and such. So we spent some really good time, the chiefs, myself, Mr. Wilds, and others, to talk about what our needs are and where we can locate those, whether they need to be on site at the PD, on site at the fire department, whether they can be located up at the DPW building. What we've landed on is we have a space that, if you notice going through the DPW yard, it's kind of an up a hill. There's 2 tiers, 3 tiers as you go. Second tier, there's an old building. It's not, you wouldn't notice it unless you look for it, but there's an older building that's storing a lot of the old water parts in it. The idea would be, if and when the old highway garage comes offline, we can no longer use it for the purposes of storage. And we're now recognizing economic gains through new growth, amenities downtown, all things we talked about. We need to restore things. The idea would be to put potentially a 5-bay building up in that location that would satisfy a lot of our needs for storage purposes. But that is mostly a placeholder and at the time, because the cost of doing this right now is increased significantly. And at $375, the person who quoted it said plus or minus $50,000. So it might be a lot less, it might be a lot more. It's a really fluid when it comes to these buildings, and we would bid it out to multiple. There's a brand, it's kind of like Kleenex, Morton Buildings, and they're like the 800-pound gorilla in the space. We would look at other ones as well that might be coming at a better discount. But this was a number the rep gave us recently, and I think it's a budgetary number, but it's much bigger than we thought it was going to be initially.
Is there anything fancy inside of it? I mean,
it has gas and electricity.
so it's just big open space.
So it would be, I don't know if it's demised between the different bays necessarily. I think it is open, is my understanding, but I believe it is open. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think the different designs you can do differently, but typically they're open space. 5 bays and one door on the side, and it would allow us to create some of that spatial constraints that we currently have.
And we were saying we wouldn't want to spend that until we actually had something really viable and exciting and worthwhile with this place, because we're getting rid of this DPW building to build another DPW building. The people would be saying, we have one already, why aren't you working with this one?
The hope is we can, and hopefully that number comes down to your 75, but hopefully the purchase price on that, coupled with some projections, some of those new tax revenues we wouldn't see, would have a payback on any further purchase we would have to make. And this would be, that building's a liability in a lot of ways for the town. This would be a clean space that would be building capacity we need to live in the future as well, which is good.
They're probably less likely to attract ruffians and ne'er-do-wells who want to climb all the roof and break the windows.
I'm just still surprised at how high it is, because you think of a house which has, bathrooms and living rooms, and we already own the land, so what the heck is costing that?
I think,
We're
today-
still working on it, I get it.
We're talking today dollars, cost of goods are up, interest rates are going up, there's a lot that plays into this right now. I think that, I'd love to see in this, coming out of the new year, where rates go, where the cost of construction goes. I want to see that. Fingers crossed. But we'll see how those projections look, and then we can make business decisions from that.
It sounds like this will be a lot bigger than what was over there, so are there other items that we would have loved to have stored if we had the space, that like this will accommodate much more than what the old DPW can store? Or is this roughly the same size?
42 by 70. Might be smaller.
It's
Is
not.
it smaller?
Well, we're taking out of that space some of the material that would be stored at the fire department and the police department with the Conex boxes, which are listed on here as well. We've also looked at the cemetery space. There's a couple places where we might be able to store a little bit of product as well. The rail trail has a bay, the environmental police have a bay. Neither of those would be coming along at this location either, so those are 2 bays right there that freed up. So we're building enough in there that we're not gonna be cramped immediately. At some point we might grow, but that's not the intent.
The way they pack in at the up the hill now, as many trucks as they do, and as much gear as they do, it's masterful. It's like a game of Tetris, and it's just amazing what they do.
Every day.
I can't get over it, it's, jeez.
All right, anything else on capital for right now at our 20-minute mark?
I would,
Just stepping back, I mean, I look at the total capital plan number, and these are not what I would call small, but I have no basis for that. Like, when you guys did this last year, or the year before, like, what are generally the annual capital asks? Which, this is the plan, the ask, this is what we're gearing towards.
yeah.
Are these numbers in line with what normal, or no?
So we had one police cruiser on the list last year. So the way it works is the guidelines that comes from the FinCom. We'll have a $300,000 free cash allocation for capital. Doesn't talk about grants that we might receive or grants that we have to purchase other items. It's the free cash component. So we are at $399. There was a discussion at the last meeting, so we made on the FinCom suggested that that number has not changed for a number of years, and there would be more.
That 300 number.
300 number, and that would be, and I also have advocated now 2 years in a row for some additional funding, especially considering, like I said, we have the free cash, it's not something that we're worried about. To go up to something 350, 400, 400 was recommended, I think 350 and 400, but the recommendation that will come out will probably be $300,000 in free cash. So we're currently not in line, but last year, the same situation happened, I think it was at 360 at free cash, and I asked the chair and the vice chair, how do you want me to roll this? I'm a rule follower, if I have to hit my number, I'll hit my number, and they said, keep your number in there, we'll discuss whether we wanna, if that's an issue or not. It wasn't, we moved forward. We ultimately came under it though when the police cruiser came off the list at the last minute. So we were intending last year, but year before that, we had all of our capital in there, and then a significant amount of that came off the capital list and was put into stabilization because it was right as COVID was hitting, and there was a lot of unknowns, and so we didn't purchase a number of items that we might have otherwise purchased because of that.
But if
So the
you
answer is
ballpark-
it's generally $300,000.
No, that's just the free cash number though.
You're
What-
you're talking about
I'm looking
21
over
million.
here on the left, yeah, the 3.7 million, 2.9 million, how do those numbers compare to previous plans?
I mean, and when we sit, I don't have it on me right now, but I
Okay.
can pull that when we get
I
into the
would-
discussion.
Yeah, I would love to, because I'm looking at, this is the spend, this is where it's coming from, I'm just looking at how much is this spend compared to
Now, I
what's
would
going.
preface all this with, every year's different. This year I have an ambulance on there, that's $500,000. I've got a ward building on there, that's $375,000.
Sure.
I've got certain things that are really this year, if you look at the overall number, but my goal is to identify obviously the needs, and then the right funding mechanisms to try to be within guidelines and utilize, we need to draw down the ARPA money, we have to spend it by a certain date. And there's certain needs that have popped up, both things that have been planned and things that have come up unexpectedly, so it's kind of not a juggling, but it's kind of like moving the pieces around to make it all kind of fit.
And maybe we can sit down, I'm a spreadsheet guy, I would love to see how these plans played out against what actually happens too.
So about 2 years ago, I froze capital spending. Because we ended up spending a lot of it, but we didn't do some of the work because of the uncertainty with COVID. And then, once it's there, it's there, it doesn't mean you have to spend it that next, on July 1. So I said, well, let's see how things play,
Okay.
trying to be really conservative. I think there's one item maybe from 2 years ago, it's the tight tank at the fire station, which the chief's working on, that's still out there, but typically the articles within a year or 2 years are drawn down on. We've already started last year we had the cemetery expansion and the water line work, that's midstream right now, we've expanded and we've done the water line, next year we're gonna come back in the spring and pave, which is the last piece of that. The ball fields, I need to share my photo that I took the other day of the ball fields, I'd recommend everybody go up to Pi and take a look at them. The sod was laid and the clay's down, they look very good, very excited about that. The lifts have been installed, that was last year on the warrants, the dump truck and the pickup truck, the POs were signed yesterday. I think they're in front of you for Monday.
That's okay, I think we're gonna sit down and I definitely wanna dig into
Sounds great.
I don't
Okay.
have to take more
You know what
time.
would be helpful too is where it says grants, ARPA, and state earmark, to kind of break out so that we can tie in the numbers, like how much of this is ARPA?
It's all ARPA.
Okay, then I don't see how these numbers tie, so it would be worthwhile to go through. There are things over here on ARPA that are not in
I'm
this.
sorry, the 55,000 is not ARPA, that's not on ARPA, it's for the boiler. That's the only one I believe that's
That
not.
is the third.
Well, with our 15 minutes left, let's hit the ARPA page then.
Mr. Chair, if I could spend 60 seconds on budget very briefly.
Sure.
So-
Did I skip ahead? Did I blow over things?
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure that I sort of give a
Oh,
quick
yes, budget and select board, yeah, so there you go,
quick
sorry.
overview of what the budget expectations this year are.
Yep.
So next week, the budget instructions will be sent to all of the department heads. I've already met Catherine and I, sometimes just me, sometimes both of us, have met with all department heads. We sort of set the expectations of what the fiscal forecast looks like. We all know last year, we had a very tight budget. We only had 2 of the 3 years of the rolling average on the ambulance, so that was less representative than it will be this year. We had a debt reconciliation for Masconomic that took $144,000 off of the tax levy to just reduce how much money we had year over year. We also had Masconomic's enrollment shift, and we were at about 5.3% increase when our guidance was 2.5. They met the 2.5 on their operations, it's just enrollment that drove that. They did a good job, it's just the enrollment part. So we got hit with another 6-figure number there. There were a lot of things last year that sort of drove us to where we landed, which was one-time expenses or non-recognition of potential earnings of revenue that we used, because these are one-time things, that debt reconciliation is a 1-year blip on the radar going down. We used, which was basically the difference, we used the ARPA money to bridge that. And the reason we did is because we are right up against the tax levy. We do not have much room. Last 3 years I've been here and worked with our great department heads and staff, we have squeezed this budget. We've done things when it comes to insurance, budgeting off, they were budgeting off of the budget number instead of the actual numbers. We changed that, recognized, I think it's $60,000 savings in the budget last year to try to balance it. But all those little pieces have really drawn that budget down. And so this year is super tight, anyway, and we're always held to the proposition 2.5, so there's only so much revenue we can take off the taxes we earn. We haven't recognized the new growth yet, that's something we've been passionately working towards, and we know we'll get there. Offset that 93% of the residents who are paying taxes, try to make that, more of that commercial come in there to take some of that burden off our people and add amenities. But it's gonna be super tight this year, and that is, some of the things that are gonna be unexpected costs is that our trash contract ends, we all know that. And we're negotiating right now on a 1-year deal to try to get 1 more year and then go to a longer term deal. Republic just purchased GRM, I think it's a good business move for multiple reasons, including we gotta test drive them for a year and see if they're the right people, if we wanna continue a relationship with them. That's gonna be an increase. I don't know where it's gonna finally land, but it's gonna be an increase of some, and it's gonna have a major impact on the budget. Insurances, we go with Maya, we're very fortunate at Maya. Maya, I said 60 seconds, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I had this all planned, I'm sorry. I'll try to do it as tight as possible. Insurances, we're budgeting 8%, should come down, but that's a starting point. Maya does a really good job of not going too high or not going too low, so we can be pretty consistent. Hopefully, my hope is we land somewhere closer to 4%, maybe better. But we've done a really good job managing our people and our health costs that have allowed us to basically stay pretty consistent year over year. And then pensions, that's an unknown as well. We don't know where that's gonna land. That was, I think, a 10% increase last year. And that's uncontrollable as well. Masco's enrollment number. We got a preliminary, hopefully it's not gonna be as impactful as it was last year. That's good. Masco's number last year was, like I said, was significant amount of cash that we had to put there to cover our costs. So those are all things that are coming. And the other one that I'll mention is the utility costs. And David Larson's here from FinCom. David did an analysis, which we can share with you. What the FinCom's recommendations in the budget is that we can budget up to a 10% increase without it affecting our, as an over asking ask, we can grow it. FinCom also is elected to do a 6-year at 0% increase on our operating budget, on the other category.
Say that again, how many year?
6-year,
6 year.
so costs have gone up X amount, and on the town side, it's maintained 0% growth that we have to manage. So we've cut things, we've tried to get there, we've squeezed that budget as hard as we can squeeze that budget as far as I'm concerned.
Kevin, can I ask why the FinCom feels the town can hold to 0% with the prices going up?
Schools are a bottom line budget, so they say you get 2.25 or 2.5%. The town is, historically, they've looked at it, instead of Middleton, Boxford, they do the same thing where they say town, you get 2% and you get 3%. The FinCom is elected in prior years to basically hold 0%. Doesn't prevent us from getting where we need to go, because 0% just means there's gonna be a lot more conversation and discussion around any increase in cost, whether it's the cost of ammunition at the police department, or it's the cost of water for the fire department that we pay back to Greg. But, you know, those costs and the utility costs, those are all things that have gone up, and I think it's just the way it's been structured historically, Madam Vice Chair.
Is it contractually or by statute that the school gets a bottom line percent?
That's how I've always seen it, because the school committee is responsible for the budget, not the select board. So they pass it on the school committees, and then they present the budget to us. And the guidelines are what they're supposed to adhere to when they present the budget.
Could I ask David, as part of the FinCom, the thinking behind the number that you give them, is that an analysis based upon escalating contractual expenses for the teachers, et cetera, plus 0% for everything else? How do you come to the 2.5?
It's a good question, I'm not sure how to answer it. It's not contractual. You know, it's different than the town departments where it's wages contractual
Right.
and then 0 other is a starting point.
And is that's what you do with the schools?
On the schools, it's just a bottom line.
And you have the
Keep in mind,
ability
on the schools, we, the town, pay a lot of the benefits out of our town hall budget, which is a big variable. And something else, Kevin, we pay, the special ed, you know, extra special ed where they have to go out of town, that's actual, that's stripped out of the budget, in fairness to the schools, because they can't predict it. Sometimes they get a transfer in, it's $150,000 unexpected, so that's all.
Apart from that, which extraordinary ed, we totally
Right.
understand and the benefits, does the FinCom ask the school committee to come back in and say, this is what we have to pay contracted, you know, salaries, and this is what we're asking for over and above? If we have a 0% for the town,
Yeah,
do they have a 0%?
They will come back. The FinCom letter going out with guidance is just a starting point. The,
Okay, but if
school-
they meet that, then you're kind of done with your discussion.
That's right.
That's
There
what
is-
happened
and they did last year, there was no discussion.
Yeah, we get back to them at some point, ask for a little
I'm
bit.
pretty sure we could have had a 2.5% budget pretty easily
I know,
too.
I'm just wondering why
We're
that
at 0.
discussion doesn't take place beforehand, like why the analysis doesn't take place to get to
Glenn,
the 2.5.
That's an extremely good question, and it probably should.
I think, I would
It would
say,
be very helpful if some back and forth, more communication. But that's a good suggestion, I'll bring it up.
I think I would say that, I think we'll land the plane in the same place. The last 3 years, I've got the analysis, our budget went up less than 2%. 3 years ago, my first budget, it went up 0.28%, and last year went up 0.97% on the town side. Including salaries and whatnot. I'm very proud of the work the team's done to make that happen, because that was the only way we were gonna balance. I mean, really, almost blood, sweat, and tears. There were definitely sweat and tears. I don't know if people bled over it, but it was passion behind trying to get us. And we had some great conversations with FinCom last year to get that, to avoid that override last year, which was huge. We will land in the same place with the recommendation of 0%. It's just that those over asking will be greater this year because the costs have gone up, and so there'll be probably more time spent on certain things that might just be cost of doing business. Hopefully that's something we can move through the process pretty quickly, but it will be consistent with prior years, and the discussion of the process and how it's laid out.
It is my intent to work with the FinCom next year to make that 0% something like 1%. Because ultimately, if we're landing the plane at roughly 1%, the difference between 0 and 1 just creates a lot more time and pressure on department heads and a lot more conversation of things that, you know, we could probably save everybody a little headache on, so.
So I was listening to you and I was sensing there's an override conversation coming, or something we're gonna have to start thinking about, talking about just by your language. Maybe I'm wrong, but how concerned are you at this stage?
So my understanding, and I haven't been in this business long enough, especially in the town side, as you know, I came from the city, much different structure, but I've done my homework, I've spoken with other communities, it's very common at certain points that you have to go for an override, because small towns structurally don't have the commercial base to support the growth of the budget that needs to happen. One of my goals is to do everything in my power to keep our taxes down and not to grow beyond that 2.5%. That's my goal. The reality, there's those uncontrollable costs that hopefully not this year, but it might be the year following that, maybe the year after that, depends, but there will be a time where the cost to just do our basic jobs and continue to, and again, it's not salary based on the town side because we've been doing 1% and 2%. It's just the cost of goods. You know, cost right now, CPI recently was 7-8%. And we're at Prop 2.5, capped at 2.5%. So we've squeezed that pretty hard to try to find those savings, generate new revenue through ambulance, field fees, the little things that do help and add up, but there's a point where you just can't find any more efficiencies, and you can't read that towel out much more, so.
Right,
Well,
so,
and in all fairness to the town employees, is 1 or 2% really what's gonna drive people to want?
So that was my
year
next
after
point.
year after year.
So one of the things that we've discussed, I've discussed it with the FinCom and the chair, in some of our meetings, I've discussed it with, our chair, Mr. Hook, and I think individually, we've had conversations as well. We've committed to doing a salary survey. We're almost to the finish. I'm hoping next week that release the draft report to review. I've got some of the data back. My intention is to be data driven, but to take care of our people this year and try to get people who might have fallen behind if they have, up into a market rate. And then determine going forward what we want to do to make sure that we stay there and maintain that. We are only as good as the people as our team, and our team is fantastic. They work incredibly hard, and they do it for all the right reasons. You know, so it's something where I'm very proud of the work they do, and I think my hope is that we can do right by them this year.
Mr. Larson, you had something?
Just for Lynn, I thought about it a little bit more. The guidelines from the FinCom are targeted to avoid an override. So
I was just gonna ask
there
you
is a
that.
logic. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, my hard drive's a little fragmented at my age.
Yeah, it's just that if 2.5 goes to the schools and a 0 comes here,
Right. No, understand, we've had
The
a lot of
starting point is-
these obvious discussions, including the employee pay and things like that.
So we've hit 6:28 on the clock. Anything, anyone want to jam into the final 2 minutes of our meeting?
Warrant articles, if anybody has anything they want to start discussing, please start thinking about anything that any individual member might have that they want to discuss. Some, just real quickly, ones that I've started to target, I had a request, and I think the right thing to do is to do a feasibility study for Clock Park. We've got some real issues with the grass, we talked about that earlier, you know, is it
Can we
irrigation?
just replace the grass?
How's this, we could, but then we gotta sustain it.
No, I mean, didn't we
Hydro,
just?
hydro.
Oh,
That was pie, that was the field to pie, yeah, it's
Okay.
clocked, the soccer fields need some work, you know, the pocket park leagues, we talked about that earlier. There's a number of other ones, MS4, the water bylaws, there's certain things that I've been tracking, if there's things that you'd like, I'd love to have those conversations with the board sooner rather than later, so we can start
did you
with
guys start putting one together for the pocket park?
a warrant article? Yeah, it's on my list as well, yep. But that's that, next, you know, as we start progressing through our work sessions, we'll continue to talk about that. And then, I gave everybody, just a rundown on the ARPA. I was asked at the last regular meeting, kind of how we're doing. 2 points I'd make is, take a look at this, you'll see the numbers are greater than what we have, that's okay. Some of it's been spent, some of it's been committed, most of it is just penciled out as things we could or should consider doing. the last point I make is we also have the ARPA page up on the website as well. We do need, I looked at it today, we'll make sure that's updated, because we've had some recent things that we've been pushing through. I'll talk with Stephanie Bellotti and get that updated.
Can I ask on the ARPA? So one thing is, we had the discussion on the library HVAC, but it's listed under committed. Like how, and these other things, at what point do they move from potential to committed?
When I come, so process as it is right now, we laid out initially, is that we put a committee together. 3 of the members are here tonight. Catherine Gabriel's on there, Wendy Hansberry was, before she left,
Yeah.
and Donna Rich, and now Debbie. And we basically solicit from our department heads as projects come up. We look at what our capital plans has been, and then we've been basically prioritizing how we wanna use the money. And then, once we get to a comfort level of the priority projects, like the HVAC being an emergency, we would have had to go to an STM to do that.
Right.
And we're able to avoid the cost and time of an STM because we have the ARPA money.
But it's the ARPA committees,
We'll make a recommendation, we will discuss it, we will get to a comfort point, put it onto a regular agenda. I'll bring it to the board and
Okay.
any department head who might be relative to it. Possibly Dave's been there as well, Mr. Lyson's been there as well, Chief's been there. And we'll speak about it, we'll talk about it, and typically unless there's something that's glaring, like I know we've been talking about the HVAC and the
Yeah.
and sustainability component of it. That's an example where, the 190,000 that we talked about, that's to allow us to move, but doesn't mean that we're not gonna exhaust those options first.
but committed maybe is a stronger word, maybe it is to be recommended or approved by the ARPA committee.
Well, I thought committed was after it came to us and
After
we
the
said
board's
yes.
committed, you said-
Yeah.
the
Then it
board
goes
says
on
yes, it
committee.
goes-
Exactly.
It goes to the committed section. And I will note on that list, we came last year for the planner early, because we had the master plan first. We're gonna work through, we're gonna figure
The
out.
master plan, you mentioned the master plan?
Master plan's on there.
He's
Yeah.
trying to get an adjournment.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
somebody talked a lot, but can I get on a future meeting?
Yeah, absolutely,
I wanted to share some of the information on the potential utility increase impact on the town. It's about
Okay.
$300,000. The FinCom really had a discussion about this. I wanted to share some information, what we know and what we don't know,
Okay.
okay? To
We
put
can
it in
have that
perspective, it's a
conversation.
big number. I've got it all outlined in Excel for
Okay,
Raphael.
I look
Yeah.
forward to it.
Not if it's printed on paper.
Can I get a
I got it
motion?
printed.
I don't
Dave,
wanna
is that
print it.
something that we could get ahead of time
Yeah,
and
you
take a
wanna write
look
it
at?
down?
That'd be
Yeah.
great.
You can make a motion to close.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I can
Second.
send you a link.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everyone.